Almost every franchise has a black sheep hidden amongst them. What is a black sheep though? Is it just a game that's worse than the others, or a game that's really different from the norm of the franchise? Maybe both. For example, I think even something such as Half-Life Alyx is the black sheep of the franchise, mostly because you can't just easily play it and have to invest into VR equipment, so many won't ever be able to play it despite it being a great game, and it's also not really just a spin-off. At first, I also wanted to turn this into a bait video where after the intro, I switched the topic to Sven Bombollen, a German video game franchise where you have to play as a brown sheep and breed all the other sheep without the herdmaster noticing it. Then I realized I would totally ruin Germany's public image if I did that. So instead, let's look at some games that are a bit disliked for various reasons in their fanbase. The kind of games that most people would not recommend if you ask them what games they should start with. If someone asked you which Devil May Cry you should play first, you wouldn't tell them to play Devil May Cry 2 first, right? Unless you're a sadistic freak who likes to inflict pain onto others. Or maybe you enjoy being a gatekeeper because it would successfully gatekeep them from ever playing any of the other games, which isn't always a bad thing. One of the biggest examples would be everyone's favorite Souls game, Dark Souls 2. But if it was everyone's favorite, it wouldn't be the Black Sheep, so sadly that's not the truth and it's the least liked one, for various reasons such as the world design and how sluggish it feels in comparison to the others. Nobody wants to be a slug, even if they are kinda cute, except the naked ones, they creep me out a bit. If they got a snail house though, very cute. I personally loved it though because it just feels so different, especially with its environments. The Black Gulch may not be a fun area to walk through because it's full of poison and it's extremely short just like me, but you don't see things like that in the other games, or the Shaded Woods, or No Man's Wharf. I don't care if the world doesn't make sense, it doesn't have to, it's not a realistic game. Sure, I creamed my pants too with some of the shortcuts in Dark Souls 1 and its world design, but even the other games in the franchise have not really managed to recreate such a world and even failed at totally making me fall in love with it, like Dark Souls 3, which just felt too much of the same to me. It feels like they went around the office and asked each person what they want in the game and fulfilled everyone's wish. You want a big mill? Sure, we will put that into the game for you with the gimmick of having to burn a part of it so a room full of poison gets drained. Wait, you want a boss that commits Sudoku if you are able to beat him without taking any damage? Sounds great, let's do that. Wait, you want a boss called the Royal Red Authority and he's actually a dog that protects the redstone here for some reason, and the boss after should be the Royal Red Vanguard who is a normal red but with a mohawk? Fine idea, let's put that into the game. It's the Souls game that feels the closest to the Kingsfield games for me, a somewhat worse game to play, but you will fall in love with its ideas and overall weirdness instead of the actual gameplay, despite all the fun builds you can run in Dark Souls 2. This topic does deserve its very own video one day though, since it's impossible to explain it in such short sentences. Same goes for most of these other cases. Two examples in two big Nintendo franchises would be Zelda 2 and Mario 2. Did you know Mario 2 is actually Doki Doki? Okay, I will stop. Everyone knows that. Those are only black sheep nowadays though. Back in the days they couldn't really be black sheep since those franchises were still at the starting line. Link's Adventure was different from Zelda 1, but since there were only two games and both were different, both would have been a black sheep. Nowadays, since there's tons of entries though and Link's Adventure is just totally different from all of them, it has to be the black sheep, even if you like it. Something Breath of the Wild could have became too. What if Breath of the Wild got great reviews but flopped sales-wise and they went back to a more traditional style? It would have been the first real black sheep of the 3D Zelda games, just because of how different it was too. But since it's the new style of Zelda, it's not really a black sheep anymore, even though some people wish it would be. In the case of Mario, I would say Mario Land 2 is the black sheep in the 2D games. Not because it's bad or people hating it, but just because of how different it is. No Bowser, no Peach, no Mushroom Kingdom, tons of weird locations, new enemies and all that. It's the Mario game that is the furthest away from what Mario is to most people, making it the black sheep since it stands out so much. A maybe more controversial Nintendo game would be Xenoblade 2. It's the most sold Xeno game ever and it most likely will stay that way for a while. Despite that, it probably has the worst reputation from them, at least in online spaces. It has gacha, the story takes a bit too long to really get started for some people, the character designs are not to their liking, things like that. So even though it's not really much different from the other Xenoblade games, people turned it into the black sheep. And also because people thought it anime-fied the franchise too much, because Xenoblade 1 totally wasn't a playable shonen anime at all. I guess. Those people had their very own 911 with the Switch remastered version of it when they made the characters all have a glow up, at the cost of looking more anime. I do get what they mean though. Xenoblade 2 has more of those anime moments that make you feel like, yep, I'm playing a playable anime, except that a lot of things that go anime as hell. Give me crazy and over the top character design, stupid unfunny comedy that still makes me smile somehow, like the sleepwalking scene, or making a whole chapter almost just to show your love for old school mecha anime with tons of references to it, and all the other stuff that comes with it. Things I was really missing from Xenoblade 3. You know what else is anime? Final Fantasy. Does it have a black sheep though? There's 16 of them nowadays, so there must be a black sheep there somewhere, right? Which is pretty damn hard to find though, because most of them still feel like Final Fantasy, even if the games became more diverse with each entry after 10. 12 was pretty looked down upon despite getting good reviews. 13 is still looked down upon for good reasons. 14 was a massive flop at first. 15 is a mess that can still be loved in parts, and I think 16 is the real black sheep because it barely felt like Final Fantasy anymore. All the others still gave me a bit of that Final Fantasy feeling. 16 though, it has nothing going on for it. Everything about it is as shallow as a little puddle after 5 minutes of rain. Boring gameplay that tries too hard to be flashy and cool. A story that tries to show you how grown up everything is despite feeling like a kid wrote it. Tell a kid to write a story for you that feels like an adult story, and this is what you would get. Convoluted dialogue that makes you think Shakespeare would have a heart attack if he had to read this drivel. And all around it, it should have been a new IP. But that's just my opinion. Others will call 13 the black sheep, or 12 or 9 and so on. A black sheep isn't always the same black sheep for everyone. How about Metal Gear games? It has a bunch of spin-offs like the Acid games, but none of them are really looked down upon, more like forgotten. And the mainline games are all beloved, and the closest one coming to being the black sheep would be 5. I actually lied though, and there is a big black sheep hiding among the others. Metal Gear Survive, a game that no one asked for, but a game I bought because for me it was just a way to enjoy the super duper fun mechanics of Metal Gear Solid 5. I'm not getting paid to say this, but it was really fun. It never stood a chance though because of all the Kojima stuff happening, and I can't deny it may look like a cash grab that they wanted to use while the iron is still hot, but I swear it's not a bad game at all if you like this kind of game, and to this day it's still the last official Metal Gear game released, not counting the collections. Is it this game's fault? Probably not, but it didn't help either. Would the market nowadays accept a new game not made by Kojima? Time will tell if the Snake Eater remake sells well or crashes and burns. Remember when Resident Evil was more horror than action, which then eventually changed with 4, shifted even more into the action parts with 5, and then basically made a Michael Bay action movie with Resident Evil 6, which is the biggest black sheep for that franchise. I had my fun with it, but that was mostly from playing it with a friend. Alone though, I will never know. The only thing I know is that the Mercenaries mode is fun as fuck though. It was just trying to do too much with so many campaigns, with none of them really being a standout and spreading itself way too thin. I would rather have one good cookie than having 4 average ones, like the ones you can get at Subway that people for some reason really like, and I think those people really haven't had an actual good cookie in their whole life if that's what they think is a good one. Sorry for using a foot metaphor, but sometimes you have to do it. I would still call it a good game, but good doesn't really cut it when you are the action horror franchise. It also lost the identity of Resident Evil in a way. Sure, you have all these iconic characters and the past relations to its lore, but instead of feeling like Resident Evil, it just felt like a random third-person shooter instead. What about the other way around, an action game turning more horror, which is kinda what happened to Doom 3. It was never really a bad game, but it just wasn't what people wanted out of Doom. You want some fast-paced shooter that pumps up the blood in your veins. Instead of that, Doom 3 tried to make the blood in your veins freeze with a more thick atmosphere and trying to scare you instead. Doom 2 came out in 1994 and Doom 3 came out in 2004, 10 years after. Obviously there have been some other games like Doom 64, but people were waiting and waiting for the true sequel, and then it was just not what they expected. This happens a lot in any kind of franchise that has a long streak of not getting a game. Some people want more of the same but new, some people want a totally new experience, especially with how fast technology changed back then. So for the last one, we have to circle back to Nintendo. Metroid skipped the Nintendo 64 and then it entered a golden time with the GameCube and GBA, getting tons of amazing games, continuing with Metroid Prime on the Wii, and then Other M, a total black sheep because instead of going for a gameplay first approach, they started putting the story front and center, and it's just not what people really wanted, and because the story is just not good. The Metroid franchise went silent again till they shot Federation Force 5 years after Other M, and people went mad, already hating it as the worst game ever made. It never deserved to be hated as badly as it was, but it still really makes you think what the thinking process behind it was. Giving this to fans after being silent after Other M was pretty much not what people asked for either. I know it's also just a spin-off, so those are not supposed to be black sheep in a way, but I really just needed another example for games releasing at a bad time for the fanbase, because we all know that the real black sheep is Metroid Pinball. In the end, a black sheep can be seen as multiple things, like I said at the beginning. What is your favorite or least favorite black sheep video game? You can tell me, but only if you really want to. I won't judge. Stay proud for what you like, even if everyone else dislikes it. It can't be worse than openly admitting to buying Metal Gear Survive like I did, right? With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and will have a good day, good night, or whatever fits your time zone. Bye bye, and please don't beat me up for buying it.